Good morning. I know I stand between you and lunch. Always a dangerous position to be in. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. I had asked that I be given a few minutes to speak about what took place in Nairobi in September because I thought it was an important meeting. One, because they used the word resilience in a meeting of African heads of state. As you've heard from my CV, I spent many years doing community development work in East Africa, 28 or so years. And in the 90s, when I worked in the arid and semi-arid regions and communities in East Africa and used the word resilience, I was accused of using big, ugly English words by the government. So to be in Nairobi in September when this summit was taking place, we happened to be there because our government had was hosting our ambassadors meeting. Every 2 years, they bring us together to catch up on policy issues and so forth. So I was very happy to be there. I also had a chance to visit Dadaab, which is a camp that I had visited many times before in my previous life as well. But I thought the meeting was important for a number of reasons. Yes, it is the most serious drought that we've seen in 50 years or so. But it was a significant meeting because we had 5 heads of state, we had 2 vice presidents, we had a prime minister in attendance. We had IGAD in attendance, we had the East African Community in attendance, we had the AU in attendance. That's very significant. And almost without exception, all partners, bilateral partners were in attendance, a number of multilateral partners were in attendance. Very significantly, a number of NGOs were in attendance in this meeting, and also, again, very importantly, the private sector was also represented in the meeting in Nairobi. I think that speaks volumes in terms of why I thought this meeting was important and why I thought that I ought to share with you some of what came out of the meeting. Secondly, I think it was an important meeting because at the front of it, the heads of state at this meeting admitted that over the years, all their countries, without exception, had not made the necessary investments in the arid and the semi-arid and pastoralist communities in these 5 countries. And that was very significant, that these heads of state were admitting that over the years, the necessary investments had not been made in these communities. And I thought, again, that was very, very important. Thirdly, the fact that they talked about the need to deal with the emergency that was emerging, that was unfolding, but also talked about long-term strategies. And I thought, again, that was very, very important. So much so that within 2 weeks or 3 weeks of that meeting, Kenya and Ethiopia had developed their long-term strategies, 10-year strategies. Djibouti and South Sudan, who are also in attendance, had also developed strategies, not long-term, but I would consider those to be medium-term. They were 3 to 5 year plans. Even more impressive was that they had committed themselves to a follow-up. And within 3 months, a follow-up meeting took place, an IGAD meeting of ministers took place in Djibouti to follow up the meeting in Nairobi. I thought that was very significant. Another follow-up was that at the end of the UN General Assembly in New York, Kenya's Prime Minister actually presented the report that came out of the meeting in Nairobi. At the UN, at the side meeting of the UN General Assembly, it was attended by some 65 countries. Again, very, very impressive, and I think that speaks volumes. One of the things that stands out for me in terms of the outcome from the meeting, there were 4 declarations that were embraced by the heads of state and the leaders who were at this meeting. They talked about 1, timely and actionable early warning information to all actors by strengthening the IGAD Climate Prediction and Applications Center. really, really important that all the interventions, and I thank all of you in the room because I know most of you are working in the Horn. I thank you for the work that you do, but there is really a lot of leakage because we haven't built enough structures, strong enough structures that can manage what needs to be done in terms of emergency, but also what needs to be done in terms of developing and presenting a long-term strategy to address what seems to be very serious problems that we are faced with. Secondly, to ensure efficient utilization of water resources in the region and better use of rainwater for harvesting and irrigation to improve food security. Food security was at the center of the conversation in this community. Investing in the poor was also at the center of the discussions at this meeting. Promote ecosystem rehabilitation and management to build natural buffers against disasters. That was another declaration. And a fourth one was the integration of drought risk reduction and climate change adaptation into development planning and resource allocation frameworks. Again, very, very significant. Of the countries that were there, I think perhaps 3 of them have fulfilled their obligations as per the Maputo commitments of 10% being given to agriculture, and I think that's quite significant. The rains of September to December have come, and they're quite good in the region. The worst affected areas, I think, in Ethiopia and Kenya have started to feel some relief, but no significant improvements are expected for some months to come. So danger is still looming. The leaders also predicted that despite the expected rains, the humanitarian crisis is expected to continue and to worsen through 2011, and particularly in Somalia. Most of South Somalia is slipping into famine. Malnutrition, and you just heard from the presentation that was just presented by the head of USAID, malnutrition and child mortality rates are exceptionally high. Pastoralist conditions are very poor and food prices continue to rise. The leaders are aware of an array of political and security challenges that exist in Somalia, and they spend quite a bit of time talking about Somalia and the fact that until and unless Somalia is peaceful and stable, we should stop kidding ourselves that the region and the world is going to be peaceful and stable. And I thought that was also very significant. Climate change presents one of the greatest threats to Africa and the world. The current crisis is a reminder that the Horn of Africa is more vulnerable to climate change than most other regions in the world. Leaders agreed that a new twin-track approach to drought risk management be pursued. This is also very special. The approach and focus should be preventative rather than reactive. And secondly, that it should be holistic rather than emergency-oriented. Existing frameworks and mechanisms for disaster risk reduction should be recognized. The new approach should encompass the continuum of relief, recovery, reconstruction, innovation, and long-term development towards sustainable development to ensure drought resilience and ensuring food security. I was very pleased when 5 heads of state said one after another, never again should drought translate itself into famine in the region. Again, that is an important commitment. The insecurity in Somalia, I've talked about that, and the fact that as a result of that, it is not what caused the crisis, but certainly the crisis and the instability in Somalia feed into one another. We saw in Kenya an influx of about 1,000 refugees per day in July, in August, and in September. Really unprecedented. A refugee camp that was meant for 60,000, 70,000 people today, the largest in the world with 600,000 people. It is the 4th largest settlement in the Republic of Kenya. Other than Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu, the Dadaab refugee camp is the largest settlement in the Republic. And with that, numerous challenges, health-wise, security-wise, environmental-wise, etc., etc. And again, the international community was challenged and encouraged to support refugee host communities for obvious reasons. country strategies and programs of Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, and Djibouti. They had brought to them to the meeting some draft strategies which were discussed. And as I mentioned earlier, several of those countries now have 10-year strategies. Leaders also agreed that it is crucial to reform emergency response in favor of productive approaches in order to promote self-sufficiency and to discourage dependency. There is a tendency that when relief resources are forthcoming, sometimes we have developed dependency syndrome in communities. The responsibility of the UN, the AU, and the development partners and international agencies was appreciated, but they also came out very strongly endorsing the strong leadership of the African countries in the region. Partners also encouraged the heads of state to pay more attention to the instability that is in Somalia. And then in closing, they talked about the need to, while responding to emergencies, droughts, and believe it or not, now we are having to respond to floods, and the need to save lives being important, that it is compelling upon us for countries and partners to invest more and better in climate-resilient infrastructure development, sustainable livelihoods that protect communities from future shocks, and developing human capital through education and improved access to health services. The countries committed to providing quarterly progress reports and to a follow-up meeting in Nairobi in February or March, and I hope the meeting that the administrator has just talked about that is scheduled for March is that in sync with the plans? It is. Fantastic. I thought I should share some of those thoughts with you because I thought this meeting in Nairobi was an important one. Thank you so much.